Shadon Larkey of Awards Daily here with Mark Ricker, production designer for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I wanted to start with, when you have this product that starts as a play and you're sort of expanding it for the theatrical experience, talk to me about that in terms of production design.
Well, it was interesting. I got the material, I got the call, and I met George, and I read the script, and I read it very quickly because we didn't have much time, and I had a meeting set up. But what I didn't do was read the play. Some of that was, I think, looking back on it, by design. I mean, it's interesting because as I've gotten this question, I didn't do it strategically, although somewhat I didn't want to be influenced by the play in terms of seeing stage designs or I didn't even read it. I was given the script. What we were doing was making a movie. I was very aware of the fact that it was based on a play. I'd worked on plays in the theater, specifically by August Wilson. But for this, I just sort of went heads and tails into treating it as a film project. That said, what I was aware of was the fact that the play had taken place, in two rooms, and probably 85% of the film was going to take place in these two rooms. So I felt like my charge was to figure out what those two rooms were going to be, what they needed to be to serve the film, and to be, an interesting place to spend 90 minutes for the audience, to be visually interesting and just to support the action that took place in the film. But it was a challenge to come up with what those two rooms were going to be. I wanted to do a good job with that.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my question for you, is when you have these two spaces that figure so largely. I mean, what did you do to make those spaces sort of dynamic and have so much character?
I mean, it's a process. I didn't know exactly what they would be. I had a sense as to, I'd done some recording session scenes in Get On Up, which was the James Brown film that I designed. So I had a sense as to what they needed to be. What I didn't know was what they would be probably 10 years prior to what we were doing. Well, actually even earlier than what we were doing in Get On Up. I mean, the technology was at the dawn of existing, so that was a great amount of research to figure out what that would be, what the booth would be, what we needed to do to present an accurate representation of the booth and the rooms and the recording studio. Sorry, I lost track a little bit about what the question.
No, you answered my question about creating sort of these spaces that were dynamic. And then I wanted to ask you about sort of the tent scene. What went into that? Because that was just gorgeous, sort of a circus theme to me, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, they were, Ma she was a very successful entertainer in the South, in Georgia, throughout the South. And she would draw thousands of people. I mean, we didn't have thousands of people, so we found a circus tent company. They had a sort of wealth of things to choose from. We picked the one that would sort of bridge the scale of presenting something that was large enough, but wouldn't seem too large to just swallow up the number of extras that we would have. It was called LA Circus, and they showed up and they stand the thing up, and they are just fabulous with the tents that they have, these old canvas tarp tents. We did, I mean, there's a bit of research out there, not in terms of Ma, although two of the photos, I understand that there's only about 7 photos that exist of her, and 2 of them were taken in front of a logo that is an eagle. I read that it was an eagle. You couldn't quite tell. It looked more like a parakeet in the visual reference. So we redesigned that a bit. But but pretty much it was just conjecture as to what that would be in terms of what the lighting would be, what the fanfare would be. She was just one of sort of multiple acts, so we designed signage that would represent that kind of thing. And I will say it was a magical night. It was beautiful, and there were fireflies, and everybody was there. I did one of these talks, and the makeup department was talking about showing up in that tent, and there's a sense of the extras, and that they were all adorned in their costumes, and the smell of the hay. And it was one of those moments. I've had a few of them in my career where you can be transported. I think it's that sense of smell whenever there's something that's going on, that connects all the dots, and it was a pretty magic night.
And I wanted to ask you thematically, because you're going from this southern opulence to this sort of like grungy studio. I mean, like, talk to me more about that, and creating that contrast within those two worlds in which she exists.
Well, there definitely wanted to be that contrast. George introduced a montage that represents the transition from the South to the North in the form of the Great Migration, which African Americans for decades were making that transition to the North. And what we really wanted to do in terms of the locations and the sense of the design to show the contrast, as it started in the woods, in that rich, just sort of organic tent where Ma really connected with the people in that tent. And one of the things, the first thing that we felt that George wanted to represent is that when we cut to the vaudeville theater that's up in the city, that we don't see any of the people. There's already a separation. The second that she's gotten to the city, there's a sense of dehumanization, and intercut with that a bit were the factories that we had, a sewing factory and a steel factory, and they were meant to symbolize and to intercut with the machinery of the recording equipment, which literally captured the human voice and turned it into a product that the second and Ma goes into this in August's script in the film. Once they have her voice, then they really don't need anything from her anymore. So in terms of the design, what we really tried to do was find this oppressive, claustrophobic environment, particularly in the rooms, but also in the city. There's a sense of the movement and the graphics and the heat, and we tried to not have any organic greenery or grass, or even the sense of where I'd normally have weeds growing out of an alleyway. We tried to eliminate all of that. Even though historically there would have been horses and wagons driving down the street outside of the studio, that's a line that George wanted to draw as well, just to not even to have horses there. So we had horses in the woods, but we didn't have them in the city. And it's just sort of subtle things like that tried to draw the distinction between the rural nature of where she came from and where she felt more comfortable, to this urban city where she doesn't really fit in at all. We feel that in the hotel when she's walking down the stairs as well. Her introduction, the first time we see her in the city, and she doesn't even fit in there. So there was a lot of moments there building to introduce the version of Chicago that we were showing, where we just tried to really show how far she had come and how far away she was from the South, where she was from.
And I know you're from the South, I'm from the South. You've done a lot of production design that's like Southern focused. Like, A, is that on purpose? And B, what do you think makes like Southern production design? What makes it interesting? What makes it unique?
Well, there's nothing like the South. You're right. I mean, some of it has just been, I don't know if it's been by design. I mean, I did start I'm from North Carolina, so my career started there in the mid 80s and moved into the 90s when there were lots of films shooting there. I have ended up back in the South with The Help, and Get On Up was shot in Mississippi as well. I've shot in Atlanta, Georgia, Amelia Island, Florida, which any Southerner would say that, it's North Florida, so it almost feels like South Georgia, but it's not. In fact, my decorator, who did The Help with me, Rena D'Angelo, I said, "Have you ever been to the South?" And she said, "I've been to Florida." And I was like, "That's not the South." But it's definitely, it's one of the things about shooting in the South, and this isn't by design either necessarily, but you definitely have the heat. When we did The Help, we had to strategize with where we were shooting locations so that we wouldn't be outside in the middle of the Mississippi noonday heat. So and the cicadas and all of that. But I think it's just a sort of happenstance that I found myself, back in that section of the country.
Well, the heat is very much a character in Ma Rainey, sort of this claustrophobic sense of like you're always running into walls, right? And these walls that have been built up for them or for themselves. Um, I wanted to ask you, are there any like details that you included, little things that you kind of wish people would notice, something that you kind of want to wink at for the audience who's going to be watching the film?
Well, I mean, I think that the details that I tried to put into the place, one of the things that George and I talked about when we were discussing what the recording studio would be is that, again, because there wasn't a great history of that industry existing because it was invented in the very years that the film represents. So we placed the recording studio in the rear of an old factory that through our research, we decided it was a chair factory. We discovered that the Paramount recording studio had been actually in a chair factory. So it's just a sense of the history of what the space could be that I tried to incorporate, was that there had been another industry that again was not about human beings at all. And now this new industry, which was trying to capture the human voice and then dispatch with the people, had been moved into this physical space. So the details of that were just, researching more of sort of mechanical factories and figuring out what that would be. I mean, there's also, because it's a film and there's themes that we're discussing and we were trying to represent, the basement band room, which was the lowest part of the three sections. I mean, the booth, which is where only the white people, if you notice, I mean, the two white characters would rise the highest. And then there was the middle floor where the recordings were taking place. But down in the basement of the studio was this band room. And George had mentioned that he just wanted it to sort of subtly evoke the hull of a slave ship. So I researched that and thought about what that was a bit of a journey trying to figure out how literally to take that. There were different versions that we discussed, and ultimately we just tried to strip it down to more of an emotional level. The timbers and the sense of being underneath the structure of the ship, we did incorporate, but it didn't push it too far. I mean, it still was organic to the sense of what this factory would be. But I think it is just trying to find the details of what the multiple avenues through which this factory and then this recording studio would have carried all of that. It's almost, this passing of the baton at the beginning of the century from one industry to the next.
I love that. I wanted to ask, like, as you're working on it, August Wilson is such a quintessentially American playwright, and then you have, Viola Davis, one of the great talents working today, and of course, like Chadwick's last performance. What is it like to work on something that feels so monumental? Did you feel that as you're working on it, and especially bringing the words of August Wilson to life? I feel like that's such a monumental task and such an honor, I would, of course, presume, but talk to me about that.
It's incredible. I again, because of the speed, I got this call one night and I read the script the next day. And when I say read the script, we had to go so fast that I met George and he asked me what I thought of the script. And I said, it's brilliant. It's August. It's, but I need to read it again. I can't have a conversation with George Wolfe about the specific work of this August Wilson until I give it its due. And I hadn't had the luxury of giving it its due yet. Having worked on the piano lesson, I mean, I literally carved the piano for an NYU production when I was studying. That was my job, was to carve this piano. Of course, I'd seen Fences, which I thought was a fabulous production, which also shot in Pittsburgh. and working with George, I mean, you know, a legend of the American theater who I was quite honestly nervous to meet. And so the fact that I got to have that experience with him, again, bringing these words to life. I mean, he's a genius of the American theater. I mean, both of them.
Mm.
Um, in terms of, I remember having early in prep, just having dinner with George. There were four of us at dinner, and he was talking about Duke Ellington and Duke's place in the American canon, just in terms of African American history and his genius. And in the back of my head, I thought, well, I'm having dinner with another one, you know, right now working on this production. So I was very aware of the uniqueness and the brilliance and the special nature of what we were working on. I mean, that said, there's the nuts and the bolts, and you just have to sort of put on your boots and get it done. But the level of talent, Anne Roth, who I've worked with a number of times, Viola, Chad, I've worked with, to have, there was a very much a sense of, at least for me, you know, a return to familiarity and family, just having had the common experiences that made it all the more special to be able to be doing this project with this group of people. It was fabulous.
What a great note to end on. Mark, thank you so much for your time. I was going through your projects, you know, doing research, and I was like, oh, I love that film. I love that film. And your production design, I have to say, just quickly on Escape at Dannemora, is some of my favorites. I loved
Oh,
the project so much. So, such a
thank
treat.
you very much.